Let's face it, the DC cinematic universe has not been off to a stellar start. Zack Snyder basically ran the franchise into the dirt with his shallow and overly stylish inspirations. Fans were upset when Henry Cavill was let go amidst the onboarding of James' "I turn everything into the same punchline" gun. And the choice to not only keep Amber Turd in the upcoming Aquaman sequel, but also keep Ezra Miller on board after some, transgressions was questionable at best.
Claim my Fourth Amendment rights to not be unlawful. Hey, you just touched my penis. Please don't do that. I'm not transgender, non-binary. I don't want to be searched by a man. I'm transgender, non-binary, and I don't want to be searched by a man.
Regardless of all that, I'm here to say, surprisingly, that The Flash is actually the best live-action DC film to date, and that's only if you basically ignore most of the clusterboink that was the Snyderverse, and also recognize that Snyder set the bar incredibly low. I'd also like to preface this video by stating that if you're wondering why this was clipped together less enthusiastically than my previous videos, it's because Warner Brothers has been striking down the Flash videos faster than Ezra Miller racks up criminal offenses.
I'm being arrested for disorderly conduct.
Yeah.
So big thanks to the Movie Cynic for helping me out with footage here. The Flash opens with Barry Allen autistically ordering a sandwich piled high with a bunch of high-carb goodies. In comes a call from Alfred explaining to him that for some reason there's a fatal situation going on at some Gotham hospital, and he needs Barry to flash his way over to save the day. In a drip of information that hadn't been revealed before, it turns out that Barry needs to actively keep his calorie intake up, otherwise it can affect the stability and strength of his Speedy Gonzalez skills. Anyways, cue a really derpy CGI storm of Barry speeding over to Gotham, precluded by some chicks having a panty-dropping moment seeing the Flash because, yeah, Ezra Miller really gets the beef curtains fluttering. Barry approaches the hospital and assesses the damage, making some fun quips about how he's the janitor of the Justice League, all while we also have cuts of Batman looping his way through Gotham trying to catch some bad guys for some reason. During that car chase, there was a sequence where Batman latches onto a bad guy's car with his grapple hook, and through the laws of physics, it made no sense how he wasn't sliced into bacon bits by just the dynamics of a drawbridge. But I guess that's power that's granted to you when you're banging J-Lo, right? Barry sees the east wing of this hospital collapsing forward and shoots out about a dozen newborns into a chaotic airspace, in a poorly CGI shot that is still guaranteed to give some abortionists a coat hanger boner. Barry saves them all, though, using his super speed, which we witness in slow-mo like in previous movies, and he even tosses a baby into a microwave to save it. Yeah, it made me kind of uncomfortable as well. There was a nurse amongst all this as well, and he saves her too, and unironically after saving her, he mentions that she should go seek mental health counseling after such a traumatic event because that's something the Justice League still hasn't mastered. Was that part of the script before or after Ezra Miller started punting ladies in hardware stores, WB?
Learn it? Did you want to fight? Is that the deal? Whoa, bro.
I will commend the writers in this instance, as the opening sequence alone really puts Barry in a positive light and paints him as the ultimate everyday hero. Batman, in the meantime, has caught his bad guys, who has a suitcase with some glowy stuff in it, but it's never explained what it does aside from having the ability to knock out half the city by lunchtime. In comes a brief Wonder Woman cameo, complete with 10 seconds of that theme that we always hear when she's on screen, and more comedic relief via the lasso of truth, which wasn't all that comedic, to be honest. Can I just say that it seems like WB caught on to the fact that Gal Gadot can't act and made sure to have her just smile and act pretty for 60 seconds here? Following this action-packed opening, The Flash actually does something that the Snyderverse fails to do in a meaningful way: give backstory. While it was already revealed in previous films that Barry's father was serving time for the murder of his wife, it wasn't a storyline that was fleshed out enough to actually have us develop empathy and sympathy with Barry's character. So this welcome conversation with his father, paired with a flashback of what exactly happened that fateful afternoon his mother was stabbed, was appreciated by a viewer that was starting to think that superhero movies had lost that attractive spark they once had in their protagonists. In a fit of pain, Barry begins to flash his way through the city and unintentionally breaks the barrier between time and space, discovering that he can actually go back in time if he wants to. Now, this was already uncovered in the extended cut of the Justice League in 2021, wherein Barry not only broke that barrier to charge the mother box, that will never not make me think of a vagina, by the way, and again in a cutscene to reverse the end of humanity in that same movie. Now, as much as the writers tried to eliminate the faults of the Snyderverse, they simultaneously make it canon only when it serves up a nice plot convenience, of which there are many in this film, by the way. But I guess that's that's what happens when you get the broad that wrote Batgirl in the scripting room, right? It's exactly what happens with the brief introduction of Iris West as well, Barry's primary love interest in the comics and a side character that was also introduced in Snyder's cut. She looks dumpy as frick in this movie, by the way. Like, she looked great in Justice League, so what happened, WB? After discovering all this, Barry decides to have a late-night snack with his buddy Batfleck and explains to him what happened, wherein we learn that Batfleck is actually a time travel genius. Somehow. And despite Barry pretty explicitly stating that he wants to go back to resurrect his mom, dude is just like, nah kid, you'll be fine, and bails, proving yet again that Batfleck just might be the worst Bruce Wayne of all the characters' renditions. Iris slithers her way right back in as Batfleck departs, leading to an impromptu beer date, which actually ends up being the catalyst for Barry's autistic brain to connect the dots on how he can save his mom and right everything in the universe. Jump forward a little, and present Barry travels back in time to make sure his mom picks up a can of tomatoes at the store. As if she hadn't forgotten one, she would have sent her husband out to get it and therefore wouldn't have been attacked. He gets the can in place and tries to go back to his own time, but is interrupted by a grotesque creature in the time-space bubble, which knocks him off course and throws him coincidentally into a new alternate universe that he's created. Flabbergasted by the sight of his now alive mother and free father in this alternate universe, Barry is overcome with legitimate tears of joy. He joins his parents for an impromptu dinner, but notices his past self approaching the house out the window, and dashes out in the middle of the meal to corner past Barry, who we find out is 18, and upon further conversations between the two, we learn that today is the exact day that Barry earns his flash powers while working at the city's research lab. In order to make sure they get the powers and so future Barry can return back to his time, the two venture off amidst a stormy eve. It turns out that Barry had acquired his powers while working one night during this insane lightning storm with the lab's windows open and in front of a bunch of highly reactive chemicals. As present Barry is trying to sit past Barry down, who is freaking out about getting chemical splooge all over him, the lightning strikes, unsurprisingly, hitting both Barrys. In the following minutes, we learn that with the lightning striking them both, past Barry has in fact gained his flash powers, but now present Barry has lost his, creating a conundrum as to how present Barry can get back. I should point out here that I'm really just hitting the major plot points in case you haven't noticed, as the finer details in this movie, like watching Ezra Miller run like an actual girl, is funny, but not exactly integral to the development of the plot. They leave the lab and head back to Barry's apartment, which in this universe has roommates since past Barry, who has a mom, isn't socially retarded. And it turns out that General Zod still invades Earth looking for Krypton's last son in this reality. We see the televised message that was broadcasted in the final act of Man of Steel, and present Barry realizes that they need to try and not only find Superman, but the rest of the Justice League. Rewriting the past had eliminated this universe's superhumans though, meaning that Wonder Woman, Cyborg, and Aquaman all don't exist. In seeking out Arthur Curry alone, I will say that Barry calling Thomas Curry and inquiring as to whether he has a son with the Queen of Atlantis, and the camera zooming out into a slob akin to the prostitute in F is for Family, was one of the few instances the comedic relief in this film hit really well. Despite there being no superhumans, Batman does still exist in this universe, though he has not been active in recent years. So, despite all the other changes in this universe, the Barrys travel to a now decrepit Wayne Manor on a hunch that Batman is still Bruce Wayne in this reality. Taking some cues from The Dark Knight Rises, Wayne Manor is a shell of itself, grim, overgrown, cobwebbed, and reminiscent of what Nicolas Cage's house probably looks like. Foreshadowing, by the way. Finding basically the equivalent of an old man Bruce Lee in the kitchen who, in a fit of suspicion, attacks both Barrys, this Batman KOs himself into a cabinet, and we find out that the Big Lebowski character is in fact Michael Keaton. I know, y'all. Despite all those trailer reveals, news drops, and even his own dedicated promo poster, it's meant to be an absolute shock to the audience. Honestly, they only really made him look like a bum to give the audience 2 minutes of suspense, but absolutely ruined any impact that could have by revealing to us well in advance that Michael Keaton would be making a comeback in The Flash. A fault in the promotions, but one that is understandable given this movie likely wouldn't have made a fraction of its opening weekend without the member Barry baiting. After attempting to knock the shit out of each other, which again serves no purpose than to shroud us in brief mystery, the trio sit down for spaghetti, which I guess is the preferred meal of like every superhero in this film, as this specific dish makes an appearance for the 3rd time here, and we're only an hour into the movie. I guess spaghetti has a deeper meaning, though, because here Michael Keaton Batts explains how time travel works. Essentially, time is not linear, and just because present Barry went back to only reverse his mother's death, doesn't mean that he didn't affect the rest of time prior to that childhood trauma. As a result, he has now created a completely separate world history that includes things like having Eric Stoltz instead of Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly in Back to the Future, and proves to us as well that in every version of the universe, Bruce Wayne is always an expert on time travel because, plot convenience.
What?
President Barry implores Keaton Wayne to help them fight Zod and find Superman, to which he promptly fucks off, much like Batflick did earlier in the film. The Barrys find Batman's Batcave and use his dated tech to figure out where Superman might be. This sequence is a whole lot of nostalgia bait, from the tech to the Tim Burton Batmobile to even the background music playing that 1989 Danny Elfman theme. Amidst their tech search, past and present Barrys clash, with the present one finally realizing what an autistic peeve he is and taking it out on his past self, not only for being obnoxious, but also taking advantage of the privileged life he never got to have. So it turns out Superman, or who they believe is Superman, is being holed up in a super duper but not so secret Russian lab deep underground, and Keaton Bats is now finally on board with the whole save the world from Zod plan. So the three just kind of jet off to Russia to find this encaged Superman. Cue some shots of Bats fighting Russian baddies and deflecting bullets like no tomorrow. Seems familiar to another recent release, right? And they find Soups in a giant metal testicle in the heart of the facility. They hack the computer and open it to find it's just a chick in a potato sack. President Barry feels pretty sorry for the skeleton of a girl though, and the three fight their way through more Russian baddies and escape the lab. Now, recall that in Man of Steel, Superman photosynthesized and derived his power from the sun. As the three plus their potato sack girl are outside in the daylight now, they get cornered by more baddies, and unsurprisingly, this becomes the introduction for Flash's Supergirl, whose seizure-style fight flying is meant to be inspired by the way Superman fought in the Snyderverse, but honestly just comes off as a horrid CGI mess that neither creates a good first impression, nor does justice for Sasha Calle, the actress playing Supergirl. The four regroup at Wayne Manor. Supergirl has a rooftop conversation with Past Barry in which it's explained she basically has no empathy for humanity after some Ruskies decided to imprison her, and she dips out to find Zod, who upon her arrival is meeting with the US military in that desert scene from Man of Steel. Now, recall in that scene originally, Lois Lane was there and she was like part of the deal to offer Superman up to Zod, but in this alternate universe, neither of them are there, and instead Zod takes the empty offering as a proclamation of war and nerfs everyone. Supergirl just floats back and witnesses all this, and I guess despite knowing who Zod is, his ambitions, and what he's capable of, she's finally like, hell nah, I need help from the Big Lebowski and the Sped Squad. As Supergirl is witnessing all this out in the desert, present Barry is attempting to gain his powers back in the Batcave, using a Bat-tenna, chemicals, and a sex chair that Bruce Wayne conveniently has in this universe. Rich people, right? Supergirl comes back, helps the experiment go smoothly, present Barry gets his powers back, and now the bootleg Justice League is assembled and off to fight Zod, where he's still in the desert murking the US military amidst all of this. I'll point out here that this genuinely seemed like a continuity error, as the speed Zod was knocking them out when Supergirl was there, he should have been like long gone by the time Justice League 2.0 arrived, but hey, plot convenience. Cue a CGI storm of a battle with the Flashes pairing up and conveniently identified by different lightning spark colors, Supergirl beefing with Zod, and Keaton in the air just annihilating air support. Aside from the sloppy CGI and poor fight choreography, they try to spice it up with one of those we're badasses because we're fighting the classic rock. But it lasts for a total of about 30 seconds and adds nothing to the spiffiness of the scene, and is added in just as randomly as when it's taken out, which is during a focus on one of the three fights that doesn't end or anything when the music stops. It was reminiscent of what Snyder would try to do with his opening sequences in Justice League, which, Lord, I tried to go back and rewatch that to see if I missed any context for this film, and that film is just a dumpster fire that I couldn't make it more than 5 minutes into. In the first instance of this fight, both Supergirl and Batman die, which upsets Past Barry, and the two decide to travel back in time to fix it. They do this over and over and over again, and in each rewrite, Supergirl and Batman always die. It's here that present Barry recognizes the error of his ways. As time travel expert Bruce Wayne had explained earlier, sometimes there are occurrences in time that you cannot avoid no matter how many timelines there are. And no matter what, this alternate universe was always meant to fall to Zod. Past Barry cannot comprehend this and continues to travel back, acquiring injuries along the way with each attempt, and eventually we see that monster that present Barry had encountered earlier attack them both. It turns out this monster is the manifestation of Past Barry's never-ending attempts to save save Batman and Supergirl during the Zod fight. Legit, we only saw this dude like once before and now he's a major plot catalyst, but whatever. Again, Batgirl broad in the writing room. Present Barry and Monster Barry begin fighting, a veritable CGI cluster boink on the screen behind them displaying the clashing of different timelines, where Superman and Batman are all different in them. And there's renditions of Adam West Batman, Christopher Reeve Superman, and the canned Nicolas Cage Superman fighting a giant spider, which was honestly just the cherry on top of this nostalgia-baiting sundae that is The Flash. Reeves must be rolling in his grave knowing that WB did this to his legacy. Monster Barry gears up to Super Saiyan Present Barry, and Paz Barry jumps in front of the attack effectively and without the writers having to do much work at all, killing past and Monster Berries and setting things back on course. Present Barry goes back in time to undo that placing of the tomato can, undoing her saving, and here we have a pretty nice interlude between mom and son that really showcases not only how much Barry loves his mom, but how much her death affected him. It was quite poignant, but totally undoes the lesson that Barry had just learned minutes earlier about not tampering with time in any regard. But he's gotta say goodbye to moms, right? Barry goes back to his normal timeline, he goes to his dad's conviction trial, and it turns out that some footage that was originally shown to not exonerate him can now exonerate him. Again, not so subtly confirming that regardless of what Barry does, he has forever rewritten the course of time. Barry's dad is now free, they walk out of the courtroom, and Barry asks Iris West on a date because now he has the balls to do so, and Bruce Wayne pulls up, who is no longer Batfleck, but George Clooney.
I'm Batman.
So this may be a hot take, but as someone who is not a hardcore Batman or DC fan and therefore went in with really low expectations for this film, I actually kind of liked it right out of the gate. Why? Because it was far better than any of those previous garbage films we ever got and actually attempted to develop the protagonist, albeit in ways that ended up contradicting themselves both within this film and the wider context of the Snyderverse, which is proven to be canon by the way, but only when the plot chooses it to be. As I began putting together this review though, it really dawned on me that the only reason I thought this was good was because it wasn't a Snyder film. And that speaks more to how low the bar is for a half-decent live-action DC film. I enjoyed Barry's development, and I enjoyed the strong focus on the importance of family. In fact, just for those 2 points alone, I rate this as the best live-action DC film to date. But everything else was a mess. I don't care what the director says, the CGI is a disgrace. So much so that the current day Marvel CGI is leaps better, and you'd think that with most of your film being CG generated, you'd at least put in a Marvel level of effort. Sasha Calle as Supergirl, I didn't mind her. The script did her no favors and made the character just a bland female checkbox character more than anything. The haircut also makes her look too androgynous, which is a shame because she's really gorgeous in real life. Her character growth was poorly developed, and her reason for being in the alternate universe was convoluted beyond belief. She's Kal-El's cousin, followed his baby pod to Earth, but the pod didn't make it and she still came to Earth. Then humans imprisoned her, but Zod still knew to come to Earth because she actually holds the key to Krypton, and the whole Krypton's last son thing was a farce, despite being a major part of why Zod was imprisoned in space in Man of Steel. Michael Keaton's Batman. Okay, this is also going to be a hot take, but the film went south significantly once his character was introduced, and if he weren't part of the plot, literally nothing would have changed. His appearance was pure bait and nothing more, and he was also killed off in the lowest T way, as well as served as a plot convenience that simply helped us distinguish between the two Barrys as they fought. It was cool for about 2 minutes, and that's about it. The additional CGI inputs of other Supermans and Batmans was there simply for bait, and were absolute disgraces. Okay, one more hot take, and that's it. I'm genuinely disappointed that Ezra Miller turned out to be a nut job because for the general audience that hasn't seen any of his previous performances, he does a great job not only playing two different Barrys, but evoking emotion when the story calls for it. In this way, and for the type of Flash the cinematic universe has created, I think he was a good casting choice. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for stopping by and stay frosty, friends.